All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our BU book club. We're going through Born to Win by Zig Ziglar. And tonight we're covering chapters 8 and 9. I loved, so Kristen's going to be hosting with me tonight. And so I'm going to take the first one. She'll take the second one. We'll kind of go through it that way. I loved chapter 8. We're just going to dive right in about getting the right advice. And I have to tell you, like, this is so key to success. And I think it's so easy, especially in the day and age of like, we read all these things on Facebook, right? Like, well, I read it on Facebook and this is what I read. This is a good cleaning hack I read on, or whatever. Half of that doesn't even work, right? But because we read it on Facebook, it's kind of a lot of what this reminded me of. Because we read it on Facebook, we think it's good. We think it's Bible. We think we can just say, like, this is definitely the way it is. Or here's a statistic I read on children and how to raise children. And it's off a meme that you found on Facebook, right? And so I think that's like a lot of where we come in, a lot of what we face nowadays. And so trying to help people get the right advice is so important, because I really believe that if we were leaning into that more, our world would look a lot different right now. Okay. Our country might look a lot different right now. And so I just thought this was so good. And I love where he says, we'll just go right in on 103. For some reason, however, many people have problems taking advice. They're stubbornly committed to their own way, regardless of results they may be getting. And I mean, how many of y'all, it's like you want to look at some people on your team or even like at your kids or whatever, and you're like, is what you're doing working? Because I can see that it's not. I can see that this is not working. Why are you not taking my advice? And I have to say that, it's funny, because I remember telling my mom when I was younger, she kept, giving me advice. I'm like, Mom, I just want to make my own mistakes. I don't want, like, she'd be like, learn from my mistakes. I'm like, I need to make my own mistakes. Well, you know what? That comes around and it's not as fun. And there's a lot of things I'm like, man, I wish I would have listened to my mama, which my mom's not here. So, but anyways, now I see that a lot with my own kids too, where it's like, and they may not say that in those words, but there is a lot of like, I just want to make my own mistakes. And you're like, gosh, why are you so stubborn and stuck that this is the exact way that you want to do this so much that I'm telling you, I did this exact thing and it does not work. People are so stuck in their ways, regardless of the results that we're getting. And I have to say, like, it's me too. Sometimes it's hard to ask for advice from your upline when you're like, man, I'm stuck and I don't know what's going on. Like, help me out here. And sometimes you're just so stuck in the way that you do something, it's hard to see anything outside of that. And sometimes when they do offer the advice, you're like, no, that's not it. That's not what's wrong. That's working. I need different, I need something different. So even sometimes when we get the good advice and we do ask for it, sometimes we're not even seeing the advice for what it is. So I thought this was funny on the next page where he says, in it, he says that we humans only second guess ourselves when we're right. When we're wrong, we get very stubborn and we won't take advice from anybody. The lesson here is that when we feel absolutely certain of our position and we feel we don't need guidance from anybody at all, that's the time that we need advice the most. And that one kind of kicked me a little bit, because I think that's so true. And there's a difference between confidence in a decision and, just knowing it's the right decision and not letting people persuade you. But then there's another whole level of, I'm just not willing to take any advice on this, regardless of who they are and what they've been through, because I'm going to insist that I'm right here. There's a big difference between those two. And I think there's an emotional maturity. Emotional maturity, by the way, is a huge factor at play in this chapter. I think a lot, like taking advice, asking for advice, taking advice and applying the advice takes so much emotional maturity and knowing who to ask for advice from. And so, like he said, that's when we need advice the most, usually is when we're so stuck in our ways and we feel like we are right and we are justified in what we're doing. Usually that's when we need advice the most. And then he goes into the 7 characteristics. There's some other really good things in here, but for the sake of time, he goes into the 7 characteristics of good personal coaches. They have good character. He says, I've always said that ability can take you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there. That I thought was so good, because you can hustle your way to the top. You can, like, let's just apply it to this business. You can hustle and recruit your way and, dig in and do all the things to get to the top. But until you're willing to build relationships and care about other people and dig into their goals and dig into your why and ask for help from your leadership, and again, get that emotional maturity and really develop your character, you're not going to stay at the top very long. And that's with anything in this life. Like, you're just not going to stay there for very long. You've got to have good character and good emotional maturity to stay at the top. Having a track record of success. It's pretty self-explanatory. Taking advice from someone who has no track record of success is a bad strategy. Again, applying this to our business, we let a lot of people who have never been successful in this area tell us all about how to run our businesses, right? Tell us all about what we can do or what we can't do in this business. We tend to take a lot of that advice. And so it just doesn't make any sense. What you should be doing is leaning into some of the diamonds, leaning into people, not even diamonds, but even your sponsor who's, a step ahead of you. Lean into them because they've been where you've been. And so take advice from the people who have a track record of success. They're good decision makers. Again, pretty self-explanatory. They tell the truth even when it hurts. That one's a big one. I think that was a big one for me to learn, for being a good advice giver. Not so much advice taker, but being a good advice giver is you've got to be willing to tell the truth, even when it might cause a little bit of turbulence right away, right? Because at the end of that, you're usually going to see some sort of breakthrough. They're going to see something, even with, my kids, there's been a lot of uncomfortable conversations that I've had to have with them, or things I've had to say to them that might, it might feel like it hurts even in that moment, but I know it's going to be better on the other side. And so if you love them deeply enough, you'll be willing to have those hard conversations. They have good personal relationships. This one is so key. If you are taking advice from people who like to use the words like, well, I don't really like people, or I don't, those are not good people that you want to surround yourself with. You want to surround yourself with people that love people, that want to serve people. They have good relationships with the people around them. And I was actually just talking to my daughter about this the other day. She was telling me like, Mom, I just don't think that there's, you can have friends without having friend drama all the time. And I was like, that is so not true, like that at all. I'm like, my relationships with my best friends, we hardly ever fight because we love each other. We serve each other. We honor each other. We respect each other. We work hard to have good relationships, and we don't get easily offended. Those are all, again, emotional maturity. I think that's just so key. It's such a key in this whole entire chapter. So if they're not having good personal relationships, you can throw a lot of their advice out the window, honestly. They celebrate the success of others, which is just such a huge thing. That's something that I'm learning more and more every day, to be very vulnerable. Sometimes that's hard when you're experiencing, setback after setback after setback after setback, but being able to really celebrate with others and being able to, be excited for others when they're having success, and not being intimidated by the people that you're pouring into, that, they're going to be better than me, or they're going to outgrow me, or what, don't be intimidated by that. Your leadership is a reflection of their leadership, or their leadership is a reflection of your leadership. So if you're pouring into them and leading them well and they're growing, friend, that's a reflection on you and your leadership. And you need to take that and run with it. That only raises your leadership lid. So, anyways, I just thought that was so good. Did anyone have anything on this chapter before we pass off to Kristen for the next one?
So some thoughts from the chapter. I wanted to point out one thing. I was just at the Mastermind Summit in Arizona, and we got to hear from Dr. Henry Cloud. And one thing he said while we were there, and he's amazing, so if you haven't read his books, read some of his books. But he had said that there are 1,000 ways to win, but what doesn't work is having 1,000 ways. So this just made me think of that, because you can get advice from 1,000 ways. There's a lot of ways you can be successful. It's not just one exact thing. I mean, you dive into how every diamond has built their business in this specific company. They're not all identical, right? There's a lot of similarities. Within our team, there's even more similarities because we duplicate the important things well, which is what I think is very, very important. but you can look at a lot of other diamonds on different teams, and they may have done things a little bit differently. And you might have new people coming in that's getting a ton of joins, and you're like, oh, well, what are they doing? And there's a lot of facets that come into play with thinking these things and looking at these things. Sometimes the shiny new thing, the shiny new toy, so you think like, well, this is going to solve all my problems. And so oftentimes that can just be a distraction from building a strong business. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't be taking advice and be evaluating and looking at what you're doing and asking the right people for advice. But you also don't know there's so many thoughts in that statement I just said, because someone who's getting 1 million joins, you also don't know their character. You don't know how they're building behind the scenes. You don't know how strong their business is. There's so many facets that to come into play. So you have to have wisdom, like he said in this chapter, on who you're asking advice from. And you also have to be able to take in advice, whether that even be from books, right? It's so good to dive into books and glean wisdom, books and videos from other people that you're watching, like all these ways you can learn in Plexus. But you got to take, be able to kind of like chew it up and take in the good and spit out the stuff that's not going to apply to you. Maybe it's not how you want to duplicate. Maybe it's something different that you don't want to focus on right now, but take the good from it, spit out the bad. And that just takes a lot of wisdom and maybe communicating with your upline about, hey, I just heard this or saw this. What do you think? Hey, I had this idea and I really want to run with this. What are your thoughts? It might be great. There is a lot of room for growth and learning to do some new things and to keep, and to get advice and all the stuff. But it takes wisdom to kind of sort through that. And a lot of times that takes asking questions and bouncing that off of someone else too. So just some random thoughts.
Love that, Jamie. I feel like you and Emily had to talk me off the ledge in the beginning with a lot of that stuff. Like, I saw this and I saw this and I saw it. And y'all were like, trust the process and stick with what works. Sure enough, that's what worked for me. Any other thoughts? Kristen, you want to run with chapter 9?
Sure. I loved chapter 8 and 9, actually. I actually just really love this book. I feel like it is so simple, yet like so many amazing nuggets. Like, and the fact that what was he, like 94 when he wrote this? I just feel like I'm gleaning from a very wise grandpa and I just love it. I literally highlight almost the entire page. So we'll see how I do here, trying to pick and choose which to talk about. I love chapter 9 because I feel like it's really, I don't know how this always seems to happen whenever I lead book club, but it seems very appropriate for me specifically. So I really related to it. So it's really good that I feel like I get to talk a little bit about it. But where he just talks about right from the very beginning, where he says, that first paragraph, expecting to win is not just a matter of thinking. You will win and willing it to happen, although that is important. Expecting to win is a right that must be earned, and there are some things you must do to earn that right. And I feel like for me specifically, when I hear expecting to win, I really did just imagine that was, what goes into your mindset and being like confident in yourself and like, yes, I can do this. And I feel like for me from the beginning, I kind of have felt that way. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a diamond. But what this chapter really digs into is like, that's great, but are you willing to do the steps that are necessary and consistently do them daily in order to actually get there? Expecting to win is really not enough if all you're doing is the mind, the mind part of that. You actually have to have action that backs it up. And then I love that he, breaks that down into the 3 categories. so yeah, to earn the right to expect, this is on the second 122 on my book, to earn the right to expect success in anything you do, you must have a daily objective to make an honest effort to continue to plan better and be better prepared for today than you were yesterday. And I feel like that kind of goes right alongside what I was saying, previously. But going into the 3 dimensions of life, and this maybe is one of the reasons I really love this book too, is just that he, really does talk about his belief in God and his faith and how much that has played a role in his success. And I just think that's a really an admirable quality to have, and like a trait that is going to speak volumes to, because you never know your audience. And I think we have a pretty safe space here, or most of us do have a faith in the Lord and have, strong belief in working from that place. But, not everybody does. And so I think it just, the way he breaks it down, and when he says, for, this is in that first paragraph, for it is out of our souls that our attitude flows, and your attitude will determine your altitude in life. The depth of your spirit will determine the height of your success. So like all these little nuggets, like all of these feel like they could be on like a sign in your office or something. I feel like that's like almost every sentence he has in here could be a sign in your office. But this one specifically made me really kind of convicted me a little bit to really dig into my parenting. And because I feel like, sometimes we see bad attitudes with our kids. And so where it says out of your soul is where your attitude flows. It's like, okay, that's like a little clue. Like, am I doing the work, the daily consistent work to pour into my kids spiritually? Because that's where they're going to learn it, is from us, like where they're examples. So like this was, I think, especially when we're in a business like this, it is, very easy to be like, oh, I've got the daily activities that I do for my business every single day. And somebody's teaching you that. Well, we don't always have that kind of blueprint for parenting or marriage or, these other facets of our life. And so I just felt like I was a little convicted here, and I feel like I'm growing in that area where am I doing the daily habits to build character in my kids? What can I be doing daily? Am I to plan ahead? Like, you're supposed to be planning ahead. You're supposed to be preparing. And that's one of, the things that I've been entrusted with is my kids' spiritual growth. And so this really convicted me to say, what am I doing? What can I do every single day to expect to win in my parenting, so that my kids can also be set up for success, right? And so that they can have, that they're at, they can have altitude in their life because that their attitude is right, because they're approaching their life, and are aware of their importance of their spirituality. So I thought that one was really, really good. And then I just love that he, I feel like he's talking a little bit to an unbeliever here on the next page, where he says, you are a spiritual creature at the core of your being, and there are specific guidelines for operating your equipment. And I love that he just states all that as just fact. It's like there are ways that you are to operate your body. And so, we have the Bible as our standard for that. And so I just thought that was a good reminder and a good way for him to kind of, maybe talk to the unbeliever and make some, curiosity, I guess, for someone who's like, okay, well, what does that mean? And I feel like, I'm inspired to maybe take that approach with maybe some of my friends that aren't as strong in their faith. And so I really liked that as well. And then the basic need for hope and love, I felt like that was really good. When you think about what we do and how we have Plexus, and what we do is really, a vehicle of hope and love. And so for humans to have that basic need, we almost do. And I feel like we kind of see this, and it almost feels weird if you are a Christian to feel like, Plexus is so deeply related to our spiritual health. And if you aren't careful, you can maybe let it be maybe higher of importance than it should be. But I feel like that kind of, hits the nail on the head. In that regard, it's talking about our basic need for hope and love. And Plexus is such an amazing vehicle for hope and love, loving on others, and hope in a future, and hope for better health, and hope for better finances. I think, and maybe Becky will say this, she says something about how, Jesus, what was it? Maybe Becky will come in and chime in, but she said something about how, Jesus was for her spiritual health, and Plexus has come in and helped her with her physical health. But she says it much more
Yes.
Is that what is it? Something
That
like
Jesus,
that.
Jesus healed my my mind and my spirit, and plexus healed my body. Yeah.
Yep. So that just reminded me of that. And that just really ties into like we have this spiritual dimension of ourselves. And that's why plexus, I feel like, is so intertwined with it, is because we do have such a vehicle for hope. And then, mental dimension, that one was really good for me. I feel like I'm really building in that area as well. I never really, this is all the personal growth. And I think plexus has definitely been a huge, key for that for me, just to see that we do need to be exercising our brains every single day. We do need to think of it as a muscle, and you need to be feeding it, and you need to be working it out, and you need to give it time and space. I think this is where he talks about that time and space to think, like that's to work your brain. So I thought that one, take time to, is that where it is? Yeah, they like people invest too little time and effort in the thought process of how to apply what they've gleaned in their lives. So actually taking time to think, I think, was super important. And then the physical dimension, I feel like, is a little bit more obvious, especially with us in our, industry and what we do. But obviously, our physical health is so important. So we need to make sure that we are doing daily activities that will, help us to win and succeed, that will make it to where we can expect to win, because we are doing the things. But yeah, I want to make sure I open it up to enough, with enough time for people to, chime in here if anybody has anything they want to add. Those are my main thoughts.
I love the part on 112 where he was talking about there's two parts to like growing, two parts to personal growth, really. So like adding in new information is the first part. You were just kind of touching on this, Kristen. And I think a lot of people do that. Like there is information overload and a million podcasts, and even people who aren't like doing this business. Like I feel like there's a lot of people that do personal growth anymore, but then you have to apply and actually do the things that you're learning. And I think what was so awesome about this section, he was talking about like, really, in order to be able to apply things, you need to reflect on what needs to change. And he was talking about how you need to spend quiet time with yourself solely for the purpose of thinking and meditating. And then what did he say? You need to have a specific thinking agenda. So I think a lot of times when people are like thinking about, okay, like I think that's something that's talked about a lot, like that you need to have that quiet time and you need to be applying things. So then people like sit down and they're like, what am I supposed to be thinking about and meditating on? Like, this is weird. Like, I'm just sitting here. Like, I don't know what to say. So I'm a big advocate. I know a lot of you have heard me talk about that before, like journaling things out, because that helps your brain process. But even like the physical dimension, like there's studies that show that as you're walking or doing any sort of physical activity, that helps just those neurons connect and for you to be able to process thoughts. Like there's just something about that. So if you are feeling like you are trying to do that quiet time where you're sorting things out in your business, like maybe you do feel like you've got some roadblocks in your business with a specific pillar, or I've got a kid brushing teeth over here, or something like that, and you're just not, it's not clicking as far as what it is. If you're on a coaching call with your upline and they're asking you questions, make sure you're writing those questions down, because they're asking you for a reason. You don't have to necessarily have the answer to that question right away, but that's something that you should be processing. The answer to that question might come like later in the week while you're out for a walk, but it's something that like you need to chew on and have a specific direction to that quiet time. So even thinking about like, okay, if I'm, that's kind of how I started going. Like if I was on the phone with Jamie right now and processing this with her, like what question would she be asking me? And you can start like processing that and almost coaching yourself in a way too. So I think that's so good. Like you can watch trainings all day long in this business and you can be like taking in all sorts of personal growth. But if you're not processing through it, figuring out what your next action steps should be by asking yourself questions and then actually applying it, you're not going to be growing.
So good. Yeah, that information overload thing he talks about multiple times in this book is It's so real. And I feel like we're all, we tend to get so busy. Most of us are all super busy. It takes some real intentionality to carve out time for thinking. And I think before maybe even reading this book, or especially before this business, I would have probably thought that was wasting time. But I love that he like emphasizes, no, like you actually need that time. Like you were saying, Leah, to act, in order to apply it effectively, you actually need time to process it. So you have to intentionally take the time to process.
I had that Kristen's heard me say it a few times, but like this past week in Austin, when I went with David, and I just had like a couple days to just be on my own without my kids. And I just went where I wanted to eat. And it was like, he was working. And so I was just by myself there. And it was just this bizarre feeling of like, I don't really know what to do except be alone with my own thoughts. And I found that like, I felt like I had, like Leah was saying, like coached myself through a lot of things. I had like found myself dreaming in a different way than I had, when you're trying to dream at your desk, whatever. And like, I feel like we do a lot of that. We do a lot of dreaming at our desk, and it's like, you need to like get out into nature and like go for a walk, like Leah said, or like whatever you need to do to like give yourself some time to process and to think and to dream and to, go deeper into, whether it's coaching yourself or trying to discover your why in this season right now or whatever. Like, I think that's so important. And I came home from Austin, like, I'm a new woman. Like, this is amazing. And I need to make more time for this. So important. Anyone else have any thoughts? Chapter 9 reminded me a lot of Atomic Habits a little bit, that just growing, adding another step daily, or just be better than you were yesterday. You don't have to overhaul everything in one day. Just be better than you were yesterday. Stay one more minute on the treadmill or whatever it is.
I loved it.
It was so good.
I'll add one more thing while someone else gives another second to think, because I know some of you guys got stuff to say.
And I'm like, y'all.
So here's your here's some time. Get your thought in order while I talk for a second. But one really quick thought. You guys, some of you have, I'm sure, heard this before, but he says, you are what you think and you become what you think. And if you take a second to really reflect on that, you are what you think and you become what you think, and you let yourself reflect on, what do your days look like? What do you think throughout your days? What do you think about yourself, about your business? Is there comparison? Do you tend to go to the negative? Do you tend to go to overwhelm and tell yourself that you're there? What thoughts are going through your head on a given day, or in how you feel about your business and about yourself as a leader, or about your team, or about any of this stuff? And if it is at all not great, then think of, and then that is what, and then if you are what you think and you become what you think, then what are you becoming in those thoughts? Is it really serving you? Is it helping you grow your business? I can tell you with a resounding no that it's not. And in fact, it's probably hindering you. So I would certainly advise to use some of that quiet thinking time, like Natalie was talking about and Kristen was talking about, to brain dump maybe some things on paper of what you tend to say in moments of stress, in your daily life, with your family, with your business, whatever it is. And in any of those negative things that you can catch, or self-deprecating things, or doubts about yourself, or comparisons, whatever, in a bad way, to brain dump that down and catch them, so that you can consciously flip that and change it to a positive affirmation, because that can absolutely change your business and change your trajectory and change how you move forward in all the things. So
Love that, Jamie. So much power in your thoughts and your words.
You can't expect to
chime
win
in.
if you're sitting there thinking of all the negative,
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, who is that? Oh, Jess.
It's me. I'll chime in. I like the part where he talks about the physical dimension, because I really think it fits well with what we do with plexus. So he says in here about what I am saying is that care of your physical equipment is a choice. And if you choose to care for your body and keep it healthy, you will be in a much better position to maximize your potential and therefore your success. And it's so true. So many people tell us like it's expensive or, and it is like buying organic food is more expensive. Buying things that don't have, all this processed stuff in them is expensive. But you have to, think about that in perspective. If you're not going to take care of yourself, no one else will. And if you're not physically healthy, then how are you supposed to be successful? He says the person who makes $1 million and ruins his health along the way is not a success. And I think, we kind of take that for granted. And it just made me think of college students. Staying up all night to study and then you get terrible sleep is not helping you at all for that exam the next day, and we just tend to have that mindset as a society that you have to compromise one thing for the other instead of using the one thing to get you further along. And I think that's where we do a really good job of trying to switch that mindset for people, saying that no, you need to take care of your health so that you can reach those potentials and be able to do all these things that you want to do. Because if you're withering away, you're no help to anybody, especially yourself.
Good.
This chapter really made me think a little bit more about, I've been reading The Miracle Morning. And so how, they're talking about making that space and that time for personal growth and how it is just so fundamental in your success in all the different areas. And I love how he has it broken up into like 6 different categories that you do every single day. So it incorporates the writing it down to process your thoughts. It incorporates the spending serious, just quiet time, whether it's meditating, whether it's praying. It incorporates exercise, like we talked about, and just getting in that habit of doing those things and creating that space. Because it's really easy to be like, oh, I need to spend some time. Oh, I need to spend some time. And before this, it never happened. I knew I needed to, even affirmations, like all of it, like it's so important. And even just changing the mindset on, I can wake up. It is that crucial that I can wake up earlier, even if I'm getting less sleep. And what I'm telling myself about my sleep, you know what I mean? Like, matters. It changes how I wake up in the morning, what I'm telling myself at night, and like that was just, I was so surprised on that. I wrote a post on it today, but anyway, it totally just made me think about that and how creating that habit for yourself to do all of those things, you're gonna have that time to process because it's already in your schedule. Like you already built it in, it's already what you do in the morning. And it takes you through all of those different steps. So anyway, I'm a big fan, but it definitely made me think of that, these chapters.
Good.
It's good, Christy. I remember a while back when you messaged me about, I forget what question you're asking me. You're like, Josh, let me go to a hotel for a weekend and just like think and work on my business. I'm like, man, that is brilliant. We all need to give ourselves the space for that. That's a good investment back into yourself and your business.
I've done it a couple of times and I'm super, super blessed by it.
Yeah.
But if you ever do it, don't go to new places every time, because then you spend all your time trying to figure out where to eat.
Good to know.
I have a quick practical tip. That's been really helping me. All of this talk about this is reminding me that I recently downloaded an app called Habit Tracker. And you'd be surprised how much, I don't know why it makes such a difference, because I could write the same to-do list every single day on a piece of paper, which I love writing with piece of paper, but something about having it there and it shows up every day and I need to like check it off. Like I've literally been doing so much better, and it makes me feel like I literally put everything on there. It's like, if you wanted to put your affirmations on there, put that on there. If you want to put that if you're trying to get better at washing your face every night, wash your face on there. You'd be surprised how satisfying it is to be like, yep, I did that. Because sometimes I would get overwhelmed that I'm like, I just never got to what I wanted to do with my business. But I'm like, look at all these other things that I did that are really important to me in these areas, because we're not just a single, facet. There's lots of different areas we're trying to improve on. So it's like, and you'd be surprised, like that actually has helped me in my business, because I'm like, I did a lot today and I can actually do those things too, because I'm not just sitting here thinking about, oh, I'm not getting what I want done. So Habit Tracker, super simple, but for some reason makes a huge difference.
I need to download that one. All right, we're about 10 minutes over, but if anyone has any other thoughts, I want to hear them.
I have something.
Yeah.
So for me, it's on page 103, but it says people are unable to encourage you in your vision and dream, and instead tell you all the things they don't believe you can do or accomplish, are negative influencers. Run from those folks. And I've really, throughout these books, I noticed that for some, I don't know if it's a sign or whatever you want to call it, but I tend to open up my book to certain pages, and this page keeps coming up. And so 4 or 5 days ago, I thought, okay, there's something to this page. I have to like dive into this page more. And so I started really, I made a list of the people that I'm contacting or that are contacting me and that I talk to on a daily basis. And I just rated them like, is this somebody that's helping me or somebody that's, I'm putting a lot of energy into and it's constant negativity? So that is something that's really stuck out to me, and from chapter 8. And so it's been very enlightening. After the 4th or 5th time of opening it to the page, I was like, okay, you got to pay attention to this. So I'm learning to run a little better.
Yeah, it's good. I have a friend who at the end of every year, he has like 20 awards, and he has the same awards every year, and he awards his friends. And some of them are like most discouraging and most negative and things like that. And he said it helps him to like realize who has brought him down in his life and who he needs to like move on and who he needs to lean into for encouragement or whatever. And he'll like send a little like message to his friends, be like, doing my awards for the year, and guess what I gave you? Most encouraging, or whatever. And it's like kind of a fun way to like dig into relationships and lean into them a little bit more, but also a good way to, like you said, like reflect on the ones that may not be the best for you to have around in your life. Last call. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and we will see you guys next Thursday. Thank you all so much for sharing.
Bye, y'all.